In a previous video, we looked at a checkbox input interaction, sort of a list of checkboxes and allowed a user to say which movies he or she had seen. We're going to do version 2 of that. We are going to, instead of using on-click attributes to connect to the interface to the code, we are going to work with adding listeners. We're going to move the JavaScript to an external file and a few other changes. The URL seen here is a link to the code for this version. Okay, so here is I took out, in the previous version, I had a single checkbox, and I've taken that out, and I'm just going to focus on the list. Okay, so the user can say which movies they've seen and show which movies they've seen. There's an alert. I'm showing the console, something in the console, and there are check events or click events of the checkboxes, I guess I should say, and then button events. Okay, and before, in the previous version, this was an ordered list, and now it's just items below each other, just items with breaks between them. Okay, so there are a few changes, some of them simpler, some of them more sophisticated, so a mixed bag. Okay, so here is the HTML. The style sheet is an external style sheet. It is, I guess I should point out that it's just the name. If you reference something that's just the name of the file, that says that those two things are in your file system right next to each other. So you can see down here, is my Visual Studio Code is open to this folder, and we can see that indeed the CSS and the JavaScript and the HTML are all next to each other in my file system. Okay, so we've looked at this style in the previous example, but there's some styling of the body, div and input, give it a little bit of margin, inputs, go to bold, and input in general is both the button and the checkbox are both inputs in this case. Here's a specific styling for the button. Here's an even more specific when the user is hovering over the button. So when you hover over the button, its style changes. And here is a styling of the label, which is what is next to the checkboxes. These are the labels. They are inline block. Inline means that they can share, be on the line with other things like the checkbox. Block means I can assign them widths and so on. So, and this is the rounding of the corner. Okay, and then this is the styling of the labels that are next to the checked checkboxes. So the checked checkboxes look different than the unchecked checkboxes. So that is the styling. Then here is the HTML. We have mostly just a bunch of checkboxes and then a button and a div. A checkbox is an input of the checkbox type. I've given them the checkbox's ID. That is more for the purpose of working with the label than how I'm going to work with them in JavaScript. So the ID of the input matches the 4 of the label, and that makes them work as a team so that I can check either on the label or on the checkbox itself. And that matching of the inputs ID and the labels 4 make them work as a team. So what else do we need to talk about here? The name in JavaScript has a sort of a grouping aspect, so then I can deal with these movies sort of as a group because they all will share the same name. And the value is what we pass behind the scenes, so that if I'm grabbing the value of this checkbox, I will grab the title of the movie, The Godfather. That also happens to be what's written between the open label and the close label. And there's no on click here. We're going to do that through an add event listener. Okay, so that's the, and then here's the break. So each movie will have a break, so each movie will be on its own line. And these are all just different movies. Here is I guess I should say, I said before, but I'll say again, the purpose of the name in terms of client-side scripting is just this, to group the things together. So I will be able to work with these checkboxes as a group. The weird name with the square brackets in it is, in case I were also going to use this, say, in conjunction with a server-side language like PHP, then I'm announcing that that what I'm going to pass to some server here is an array. So that's why the weird name has square brackets in it. Not really important for JavaScript, but can be important for some server-side language. Here's the input of the button type. The value is what the button says, select movies. There's a div for displaying the results of displaying the movies that the user checked after they click on the button. And then here is a link to the code, which we're going to show next. So all of our JavaScript is an external file. So now we're looking at that external file. We are going to have, the button is going to have a click event. So again, we had no on-click attributes over there in our HTML. But if we know here we're working with IDs, if we know the ID of the button, we can give it a click listener. And here's the name of the function, handle button, which I must define below. I am now grabbing all of the checkboxes here. So I'm using here with the button, there was one, I work with get element by ID, but with the checkboxes, I work with get elements with an S by name. And I'm using the name of the checkboxes. So now checks is all of the checkboxes. And I'm looping over them in sort of an old-fashioned loop and adding a click event to them, and that will be handled by handled checkbox click. This is the code to, if the button for any reason in the history of the page got disabled, and then we refresh the page just to make certain that it gets re-enabled when the page is refreshed. This code, so far the code down to here, even down to like line 20, all this code is not in a function, so it gets executed as soon as the script gets called, and the script gets called at the bottom of the page, as we saw. Okay, so this enables the button, and here we're looping through all of the checkboxes and making sure that they're not checked, that the check property is false. This that's a little inefficient here. I have two different loops. So one time, so I could have probably combined this loop and this loop. They're both loops over the checkboxes. So not very smart on my part. What can I say? Here's the button. When they click the button, the reason for checkboxes as opposed to radio buttons is that you can choose more than one, in this case, movie. And so the result is going to be an array. As opposed to the previous version, I'm using a query selector here. So in the previous version, I looped over all of the checkboxes, and then inside the loop asked if the checkboxes were checked, and if they were checked, then added the list. But here I'm using a query selector just to show you a different way of doing it, and using the input name chkMovie : checked. So this checked is just the checkboxes that are currently checked. And then I'm looping over that array, sort of an old-fashioned style of looping over the array, and I'm adding the movie. The checks values were the names of the movies, the titles of the movies. They are being added to my the user input array. If this was an array, if its length is 0, that means the user chose no movies, and we just alert you didn't choose any movies. Otherwise, we're joining all the movies with a comma and a space, and that's in our alert. And the same thing for a console log. And then on the page in the div result, we're also taking the movies, and this time we're joining them with a break tag. That's what put each one on an individual line. And we disable the button. Here's the function for handling the click. We are clearing out the list of movies, the div result. We are clearing that out. We are re-enabling the button. So if they've changed their information, we would allow them to be able to click again. And we're also doing a console log. So we're showing the value of the checkbox. So the checkboxes call list. So we're showing the value of the checkboxes, again, which was the title of the movies. And we're also saying whether it was checked or not. That's a Boolean, that's true or false. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you in this example. Thanks very much.